Okay. Welcome back. The true believers have stayed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do the split bowls, and those have been kind of the focus of my work in recent months. I've been spending a lot more time on those than I have with any of the other pieces, and actually it's about at the point where when I make the suspended vessels and the goblets, it's to bring to demos. But you know, it's just one of those things where you're always trying new ideas. So what I have found is that this split bowl idea has so many possibilities. I mean, if you think about turning in general, you know, you're making something round, and look at all the things that can be done with a round object. I mean, the vast millions and millions of different permutations on making something round. So making something half round has almost as many possibilities as fully round. And I can't take credit for the concept. There are other artists that have been doing this for much longer than I have. And in particular, Stephen Hatcher and Marilyn Campbell are probably the two best known that really work in this. That's not all they do, but they do a lot of pieces like that. If you're not familiar with them, Google them, go to their websites. The work from both of them is just phenomenal work. Sorry. So I'm just going to go very briefly through what I do. And one of the questions that's been asked has been on how I do the how I do these little squiggly pieces here. And even though this is not a split bowl turning, it's the same principle. I mean, it's this. I just wanted to talk about that just very briefly. It's a product called Comp Wood, and it's made by a company in the south end of Puget Sound called Fluted Beams, and their website is flutedbeams.com. And what they do is they have a process where they take lumber, put it in a chamber filled with water, and then they have this big hydraulic ram that compresses the wood both width, height, as well as length. And you know how hard it is. I mean, wood just doesn't move lengthwise. It's the other ways. And it loses about 20% of its volume as it does this. And what happens is that the fibers get compressed, and it breaks down the lignum that holds all the fibers together. So when you get it, you can bend it, and it pulls the fibers back out. And you can bend it to about 2.5 times a radius of the thickness of the wood. So if you've got a piece that's an inch wide, you could bend it to about a 3-inch radius or so. It comes wrapped in saran wrap because it's still wet. And when you use it, when I use it primarily to turn like these little pigtail type things. And what I do is I let the piece air dry for a while till it stiffens up. Make like a 1x1 by 6-7 inch blank, whatever I need. Turn it, and then once it's turned, soak it in water again, and I can bend it in all these little squiggly shapes. And again, I'm not the first one to do this. It's been around for quite a while, and there are other artists that use it quite extensively. The company mainly, their main business is architectural stuff. People that want, curvy decks. They do a lot with pergolas and things. They do a lot of work with wineries since they're out on the West Coast. And there are some artists that work with it that aren't turners, that they just do these big installation pieces with all these curvy boards in it. It's very cool stuff. It's a little expensive, but you can get an artist pack, or it's kind of promoted as an artist pack. And basically, it's a box of cutoffs. You get 1x1s, 1x2s, 2x2s, whatever. Different species, maybe 2 feet long, 3 feet long, just whatever. And you kind of have to wait till they acquire enough, because this is a tiny, tiny part of their business. But you can go on their website. You can get all the information you want about it, and it's just really cool stuff. It's just a different way to do things. I don't think I could steam bend these pieces and get the same effect. So having a product like this for somebody like me is really, really terrific. So if you're interested, maybe a couple of you can get together and order a sample pack. The last time I looked, the sample pack was $100, and you get like $200 worth of odds and ends of stuff. There's a little bit of a learning curve with using it, so you have to cut some pieces up and experiment with it. But once you get the shape or the form you want, if you, like I said, you soak it in water and just regular tap water, and it gets soft enough then where it's bendable again. And if you don't like it, soak it again, and you can keep doing that. So anyway, give it a try. If you want any more information, you could either email me about it or just email the company or go to their website. And again, it's flutedbeams.com. And fluted, F-L-U-T-E-D, B-E-A-M-S.com. And you can get all the information there. Or you can just Google comp wood, comp for compressed, and check it out. I mean, it's just it's an interesting product, and it has a lot of potential for things. It's another example of taking a product that really wasn't meant to be wood turning and adapting it. And that happens all the time in wood turning and all other art forms. People will adapt things to suit their needs. So anyway, I just wanted to cover that really quickly. Hope that answers your question about it. So when I make these split bowls, and I've got to come up with a sexier title, because that just split bowls sounds like soup, something. I start with just a regular blank, and I usually work with wood that I get at a hardwood lumber dealer, just boards. I don't have to get big, really expensive turning blanks. I can just go to the lumber yard, and I can pick out boards that have a really nice figure and all that and use that. So that's what I do. All those pieces there started out as like 1 by whatever. On a big piece like the one on the end, I'll take, the boards only comes maybe a maximum of 9 or 10 inches, so I'll just do 2 semicircles, glue them together. And you only see one side, so if it doesn't match perfectly across that joint, it doesn't matter. But the process is the same. And what I do is I cut out a turning blank. This is about, 7 inches or so in diameter. And I mount it on a waste block with double-sided turner's tape. And I want to pass this around. This is a sample with the one side still on. If you're doing really small pieces, like those little pendants that I did over there, those pins, you can use regular carpet tape, that really thin plastic stuff like you get at Home Depot. But if you're going to do anything with any substance to it, like this size, you want to use real turner's tape. It's designed for this. It has extremely high tack, so it holds really, really well. Usually the biggest problem I have is getting it to come apart at the end. I seldom have problems with it flying off, so we'll hope that holds true. And I have to be careful sometimes that when I take it off that I don't break it, because it holds so well. So see where my there it is. Open this up. So in this case, I don't really, it doesn't matter that this little block is going to bottom out on the chuck. If you want to make a glue block with a little tenon on there, or a waste block with a little tenon that'll grip it a little like we talked about earlier, that's fine, but I find that for virtually everything I do, this works very well. And there are 2 reasons I use the double-sided tape. One is that I don't lose any wood here. Since I'm working with something pretty thin to begin with, by taking the tape off, I still have that entire amount of thickness available. And the other reason is that I don't have to make a new mounting block each time. I mean, I've used this one dozens of times, and it still works quite well. And of course I use different sizes for different size pieces. I can't tell you what the formula is. Generally, if this is maybe a third to a quarter of the diameter of this, that seems to work. And the other thing that helps is that I have the tailstock up against it for virtually the entire turning process. So I've got a good solid support there. Having said that, the last demo I did, it started to wobble around on me, but I got too aggressive with the cutting. So anyway, I keep this all in place with the tailstock, and let me get my little goggles again. Now normally when you're turning a bowl, you turn like the outside first, and then you put a little tenon here and reverse it, and then do the inside. And for this I do the opposite. I don't know how the other artists do it. I think Stephen Hatcher does it differently. And I haven't talked to Marilyn Campbell about it, but this technique seems to work pretty well for me, so it's kind of what I stick with. And I do want to start this out slow since I haven't had this on here before. And it's just a touch out around, but that's okay. So I'm just going to stick with my Easy Wood tools here. And the first thing I do, this is where a face mask really comes in handy. And I know you offered me one before, but I'm good. So I get this down to round. You don't really have to do this part, but it just makes it balances a little bit better. And then I can crank up the speed a little bit. So what I want to do is I'm going to turn the outside on here, and it's going to be on the inside of the lathe. And I'm going to go ahead and do it with this. And you can see how well, I'm going to shut up while I'm doing this because I'm getting face full of dust here. Oh, okay, you're kind of... I guess we should have talked about this beforehand, huh?
Well,
he's going to really be mad when I move around to the back side and he won't be able to see then either. So you'll notice that I'm leaving a little bit proud right at the end here. If you can see the end, you'll see that it's kind of an OG shape. And the reason I do that is when I reverse chuck this, I want to make this a nice smooth curve. So if I have this flat, if this curve comes out flat, so it's like this, then I've got to take more off in the middle. This way I can only have to worry about the little bit that's right in the center. So get this smoothed out a little bit more. And again, because of time considerations, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with this. So once I have this shape done, and I would do all the sanding and everything else that I need to do on it, I'm going to be on the other side now. So the actual process of making this shape really goes pretty quickly, as you can see. So the next thing that I want to do is hollow out the inside. And actually the first thing that I do is I'll kind of smooth this out a little bit. And I want to start hollowing out just a little bit. but I'm not going to go very deep. And you can see how I can cut in both directions with this. So while I still have quite a bit of wood here to work with, one of the keys on this is that this face right here needs to be perfectly flat, because when this is cut apart, you know, it's like folding this over. So I want two faces that are going to meet exactly flat. If I've got if it's off either this way or this way, when I glue it together, I'm going to end up with a gap, and I don't want that, because I have to do some sanding after this is all assembled, and so I want to make sure that, you know, I've got a good solid gluing surface there. So what I do, I'm going to turn this down a little bit, is I take away the tailstock for a minute. So now all the support is coming just from the tape, but all the pressure that I'm putting on it is going directly into the tape, and I'm only working with, you know, an area that's roughly the size of that block. And all I want to do right at this point is remove some of this from the middle. So then the question is, how do I get this face to be perfectly flat? Now, if you're really, really good at turning, you might be able to do it like that with a tool. But I'm not, so what I do is I just take this is just a block of MDF with a sheet of sandpaper glued onto it with spray glue, and pull this off, and I just stick this up against here like that. I hold it with this hand and then push on it with this hand here, and it really helps to have dust collection when you're doing something like that. But by scooping that out a little bit, that means I'm only taking away from right at this edge and not trying to sand down this whole thing. And I'll take a straight edge and put it up against it and make sure that I'm flat. And if I take the straight edge and turn it on its side so I get a really sharp edge there, I can see that it is indeed pretty flat. So then I would go back to finishing the hollowing, but to do that, I'll put the tailstock back in, just as a safeguard. And, you know, as you can see, I've done this on big pieces that are like that big in diameter. And I usually use on that really big one there, it was about 18 inches across, and I think my block was maybe 5 inches across or so. And even that, I mean, it held on so well, it was really tough to get it to pull off. Okay. He was asking how wide I leave the rim, and normally I'll leave it a quarter of an inch or so. On a bigger piece, maybe 3/8. Two reasons. One is I want to have enough of a gluing surface that I'm not going to have a problem. I'll have enough glue strength to hold everything together. The second reason is that if I'm using a support pin system, now the big one doesn't have that, but the others where there's like a central pin holding it to the base, I need to have enough wood in here that pin's going to grab, and it's going to grab around that pin and it'll support it. If it's too thin, then it's just going to wobble. It wouldn't be any way to really support it securely. And I'm not really concerned with having, you know, really thin walls again, because these are all closed vessels. On that big one, it turned out I needed to make the walls pretty thin because of that one area that's open. But once I turned it, I ended up using a Fordham with a sanding fixture on it, and the area where I wanted to have it hollowed out, then I just did a lot of sanding to get it down to the thickness that I wanted. But again, that thickness wasn't that critical on that piece. And the same way on this, it won't be that critical. So at this point, I would just continue, see if I can get this to show a little better. And I work from the outside in. Oops. Now again, I want to work from the outside in because as this gets thinner, it's going to be less wood supporting it, and it's going to start to wobble around a bit. So I want to work my way down to the thickest part, and I think I'm probably about as thin as I want to get there. I don't do much on the outside once this part is turned. I'm not going to be taking away a lot more. So I'm about looks like about a little less than about an eighth, so that's fine. If I was going to do a lot of texturing on this as opposed to piercing, which I really haven't done a lot of, but if I was going to, texture in different designs, I want to make sure that this wall is thick enough that I can carve into it without it poking all the way through. So the biggest problem I have really is not making these walls too thin. So that's probably about as far as I want to go. You can kind of hear it as it gets thinner. Okay, so now I want to take away the tailstock again. And just take away the rest of the wood in the middle, and I'm relying entirely on the double-sided tape to hold it. And what I will do, even though I'm not really concerned about the wall thickness, I will often, as a kind of a practice thing, is try to get this as smooth and as perfectly shaped as I can. Anytime you can practice at something, you benefit from it. It just gives you a little more control for when you may need it later. So that's probably good enough for that. And that's something I wanted to kind of bring up. People that work in metal, like metal engineers, that sort of thing, precision is everything. Everything has to be extremely precise, and there's not much room for error. Tolerances are really tight. Woodworking and wood turning, not so much. So, when I say, well, that's pretty good, that's good enough, it usually is, because you've got a lot of flexibility with what you're doing. I mean, you can sand away a lot of things. You can control things a lot better. And so the idea is that you don't have to be maybe as super precise as you would, say, if you were working on a metal lathe or something like that. If you're doing like a threaded box or something, that's a little bit different story. There you do have to be very precise. But for something like this, close enough. I hate to say it, but close enough is good enough. So this is still a little thick, but I'm going to leave it just because of time issues here. So now what I want to do is pull this off. And you can't yank this stuff off. You just let it kind of pull off by itself. And I'll pass this around so you can kind of feel what it feels like without the that protective cover on it. Woodcraft. Do you have the 2-inch? Yeah, that's where I get it. Right. I get the 2-inch rolls just because you don't have to use as much. But you have both 1-inch and 2-inch. Okay. Two different. Really? Oh, is that new? Really? Oh, the only stuff I've seen is this one right here. The number 16D29. That. Okay. I didn't know they made it different. Yeah. Well, yeah, 29. Oh, okay. I think you want the stronger tack, just to play it safe. So it's a little expensive. I mean, it's $30 a roll. But, I've had this roll for like 2 years, and you only use, a little bit. I probably use more at demos than I do at home. So now that I've turned that off, and I hope that this is going to fit okay, we may have to pull this out some more. Is this out as far as it'll go? Okay, yeah. Yeah. Almost, but not quite. That's a pain doing that too. All right, so he's going to reset the jaws on this. Oh, by hand. Yeah, these guys are strong, aren't they? And the reason that I made that set of calipers will become apparent when we remount that. This should only take a minute or two. So I'm going to take this set of jaws, this chuck off. I have been asked in the past what prompted some of these ideas, and my answer is I have no idea. I really don't know how it started, doing the goblets, doing the suspended things, doing these things. I don't really have a clue what kind of prompted the idea to do it. It's just one of those happy circumstances, I guess. Wow, that was quick. Oh. What a... All right, so now uses the same key. Okay. So the reason I mount it on this kind of a system, there's a jaw set called Longworth, which has those little spiral slots in it, and you can adjust the size in and out. But the reason that I use this system is that this caliper that I made will fit right inside here, and I can measure all the way to the center and get the wall thickness that I want. So that was the entire reason I made this thing to begin with. So if I do need to make it like really thin, like if I'm going to pierce all the way through, that's why I did that. So, and it does help me as I'm turning this down to make sure that I don't get too carried away. Now, because these kind of jaw sets don't, because of the rubber here, they don't, they're not quite as accurate as an all steel one. So when I put this on, it may or may not be exactly centered, and it's a little hard to tell. Turn it. It's not too bad. Now there is a maximum speed that you should run these at, and you should really pay attention to that. I think on this one it's probably 1,000. 400? Well, see, I've got the really big ones and it says 1,000. Yeah, that's easy for you to say. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't say. Maybe it's buried underneath there. Well, oh, here. Nope. Yeah. Well, that's in New Zealand. Maybe it's they have a different RPM system. They go the other direction. All right. So now what I want to do is just take away this in the middle. And hope that I didn't make it too thin. So I normally don't cut out into here very much because, hear that? Because this isn't going to be exactly true. But it's close enough. And when I sand this, now I would have sanded the outer edge of this while it was still mounted the other way. I would have power sanded that. So I just want to double check here to make sure I'm still okay. Oh yeah, gee, I got a 3/8 of an inch there. I'm in good shape. Take a little bit more off, get a little bit smoother. This is also a good example of this raking light. You can see how it's the angle that the light is really shows up any little tool marks, hills and valleys and things. And so we'll see how that looks. And this is a little off, so I'm not going to do too much more. Just now, if I were going to say I wanted to put a different piece of wood in the middle here as a detail element, none of those have that. But some of them I'll have maybe a really dark piece right in here. I would leave the center of this thicker on the back before I did that. That's a case where I would need to know before I started what I wanted to do. And then I would, turn this out, turn the hole in here or a recess for that little detail piece to go in. I am going to do just a touch of sanding here. Just to smooth this out a little bit and then move along. And this is where the power sanding is really good because I don't have to get my fingers close. And with that 5-inch disc in the drill, I can actually sand almost right to the bumpers. And works pretty well. So you definitely don't want to get your fingers caught in one of these things. Okay, so now I've got the basic shape, and this is really rough. It's not, it's kind of not a real smooth curve, but you got to understand the principle of it. So now if I was going to just double check the thickness. Okay, it's still plenty thick. So if I wanted to put a detail ring or something in it, and I would use this. I showed you earlier this parting tool that I ground the sides down. So what I did was I wanted to have the sides to be pretty uniform, so that I don't make a V-shaped groove. It's like a channel. Think of Star Wars and the big final battle scene where they were in that. I forget what they call it, but it was straight sides. And the reason I do that is that if I make it a V groove, when I sand it, I could end up sanding some parts lower than others so that the width of the groove is going to change. This way, by having straight sides, when I sand it, it's going to be consistent all the way through. So I might put in a detail ring in the middle, and maybe I'll texture that or something, or maybe I'll put a couple rings out here and maybe do some design work in that area. And this is nice and thin, so I get a nice, sharp little line there. Okay, so then the next step is I want to cut this in half. And at home I've got a little platform that sits in the tool rest, and I can take a pencil and line it up and just draw all the way around. No, I get it right dead center, and everything's going to line up right. So if you don't have that, it's not a bad idea to have anyway, something like that, just to take measurements now and then. The easiest way is just to take turn the lathe on and take the live center, and I'll put it right in the middle. All I want is an indication of where the center is, so that when I cut this in half, I don't have to try to figure out where the middle of the piece is. So when I got my set of jaws, and I got the really big ones, it was like, man, that's $100 or whatever it was. But I've used it so much that it really does pay for itself. My other ruler, I had a red plastic one. It's buried in here somewhere. See if I can find it. If not, I'll do something else. Well, I don't see it. All right, I'll just do it with this. Weird. It was in here with all this other stuff. I wonder where it went. Well, I don't see it, so I won't waste any more time. I've got a like a really thin plastic ruler. I probably got like an Office Max or someplace, but it bends really easily and will conform to the shape. So I'm just going to use the other one. Now the thing is, on these, I want to have almost virtually everything I do. I want the grain of the piece. I want the piece to sit so that the grain is running this way. Because the top that I'm going to put on, the grain is going to be running this way. So if I turn this so that the grain's running this way, and I have the top this way, then I'm going to have problems with wood movement, and eventually the glute joints are going to fail. So on this piece, the grain's running this direction, so I just take my ruler, and I would normally use the plastic one and just draw a line right down the middle. Doing it this way is not super accurate because as this bends, it'll tend to twist a little bit, but it's again, it's kind of close enough. So now I've drawn the line down the middle. I've put whatever, if I want to do any detailing. I don't do any of the detailing until after I've cut it apart. In other words, I don't try to fill all this stuff in here until after it's been cut apart. So that is the next step, and that we need the bandsaw for. And I'm hoping this will work, since this bandsaw is a little... I do this on a scroll saw at home because the scroll saw has got a much finer blade, so I can get a finer kerf. When I first started doing these, I was doing them on the table saw. I was making a plate for this to rest on. I'd tape it on there and run that through the table saw. It worked, and I could get a nice, really smooth cut and centered and all that, but I was always concerned about my hand sliding off and the piece twisting and getting kicked back and stuff, so I stopped doing it that way. Also, do any of you take the Woodturning magazine, the British one? Nobody? Does anybody take that? You do? Great magazine, isn't it? It's Woodturning design is geared towards more, I guess I would say more novice. There's a lot of stuff in there for novice turners. It's a great magazine, and as Ron will tell you, where'd he go? He disappeared. Oh, a great magazine, right? Woodturning design. And I've been fortunate to be in there a couple times, and I've also been very fortunate to be in Woodturning magazine. Now it's more expensive. It's like $75 a year, but you get 12 issues, and it's published in Great Britain, but much of it is American turners or North American turners, and it's kind of bridges the gap between Woodturning design and the AEW journal in terms of level of difficulty and that kind of stuff. Although Woodturning design has some pretty out there stuff too. But it's a really good magazine, and this month, the October issue, there's an article about how I make these in that magazine. So check it out. You can usually find those at Barnes and Nobles, but it's hard to find them on the newsstands. I know that Woodcraft doesn't carry it. But I heartily recommend that you consider subscribing to that magazine. There's a wealth of information in there. Yeah, I'm in there. So, and if you had your copies, I could sign them for you. And I've been in there a couple times, which is really nice. But anyway, the article that's in there actually shows how I do this on the table saw, so there you go. But anyway, I want to do this on the bandsaw. I'm just going to cut it out. Wow, man. That's just nasty sounding. All right, so you end up with this clamshell kind of shape. Now, obviously, this didn't line up quite right. I will blame it on the bandsaw, but also sometimes when you take it off of here, or because it doesn't remount as well, it's a little difficult to get it lined up. But when that happens, I just sand it. I can take like this sanding block here, and I'll tape this together, and then just run it across like that a few times till I get it sanded down smooth. Or I can take it to that little belt grinder sander thing I've got and stick it up against that, and that'll get it down. And you can see that the walls are pretty thick here. But that's the basic form for that. Now the next step, and it's probably the last thing that I'll cover here today, is what was it? There was a flat piece of wood down here. Oh, there it is. So the final step in the basic process here is to make the top. The other thing, if some of the pieces will have a piece of veneer in between, and that veneer serves two purposes. Primarily it's a design element, so that it just adds a little extra detail, and I think a couple of those have that over there. The other reason I do it is that sometimes the wood doesn't quite match up on the edges. So when you look at the end, that little strip helps separate the two sides. One thing I forgot to mention that's kind of important, when you're doing this, you want to have a piece of wood where the color is the same all the way across, like this one is. If you get one that's got maybe a big part of its sapwood and then part of its heartwood, when you put those together, you're going to have a kind of a jarring combination there, because it's not going to be the same color on the edge. Now granted, when you look at these, you generally look at them like this, but there are times you're going to want to see the end of it. So if you've got something really dark here and something really light here, it just doesn't work well. So when you're looking at wood for this, you want to find pieces where the color is consistent all the way across. So anyway, we'll assume that this has been sanded smooth. Once it's sanded smooth, then I would do all my design work here, and then if I put a veneer in there, I'd do that, and then glue it all together, and I just hold it together with masking tape. You don't need heavy clamps or anything. There's no real stress on any of these joints, so masking tape is plenty strong enough. 3 or 4 or 5 pieces on there will hold it just fine. So you end up with this little clamshell shape. And then the next step is the top, and the key on that is how do you find the center of the top to put the hole for the finial or whatever. Now you don't always have to do it that way. You can put the hole way offset. If you do something like that, you want to make sure that you really exaggerate it. You don't want to have a hole like right in the middle and offset it like 1/4 of an inch, because then it's going to look like a mistake. So you want to, if you're going to do something where it's not, symmetrical, make sure that you really can tell that it's supposed to look like that. Otherwise, people are going to say, that guy didn't know what he was doing. He just got it in the wrong place. So the way I do this is I set the piece on the top, which is about 1/8 inch thick little blank here. And I draw around the outside of the piece, and I also mark where the seam is. So I don't know if, can you see that? Does that show up? You can see the outline of it, and you can see where I marked the very end. Okay. So what that does is it provides me with a way to, oh, there's that other ruler. This is that really thin one. It provides a way to divide this in half, because I know that each half is identical. And I take my trusty little center zero ruler. First thing I do is draw a line right down the middle. So I've got two equal sides. And I know that line's right in the center. Then I take the center zero part and line it up with the ends. Still kind of hard to do because it's you know, pencil on dark wood. Ah, crap. And I put a little mark there. And I'm not going to go any further with this, but once I've done that, now I've got a mark that's dead center, both this way and this way. Then I would cut it out on the bandsaw, drill a hole for the finial, whatever it is I want to do. Lately, what I've been doing is drilling a really small hole because I don't often know exactly what I'm going to do. So rather than make an oversized hole, I'll put a little one in. If I need to make a bigger one later, I will. But cut that out, and when I'm ready, then I'll just glue it on. If I want it flush like this, then I'll just sand everything flush, and good to go. So that's then the final step is to find, like most of the time I'll have these mounted so that the hole's right in the middle and the bottom. So it's how do you find the center of that? And I forgot to bring my tape measure. Maybe I can do it with this. The easiest way to do it is to take a tape measure. Ron, you know what those are? Tape measures? Yeah. And wrap it around and find out the length of it. In this case, this is a little less than 10 inches. And then I take half of that, which would be a little less than 5 inches. Doesn't really work too well with this because it's too wide. But wrap it around again, and where that 5-inch mark is, you know, put a mark on the piece, and then I flip it over, do it the same way on the other side, just to verify that's where the center is. And that way I know I've got the exact center on the bottom, and so when I drill the hole, I'll set on the drill press, drill right down through it, and I know I've got a hole centered right in the middle, and then I can mount it on the base, and everything is all set. If you don't have a tape measure, you could take a piece of paper, you know, find how far it is, put a mark, fold the paper in half, and then you've got a halfway mark, and then you can take that, and then that'll give you the same indication. So there's a variety of ways you can do it, but a tape measure is the easiest way. Just a cloth one, cheap one, or one of those plastic ones. So that's you know, the other little tricks that I've learned along the way. So anyway, that's the basic process of how I do these split bowls. And from this, it's the same idea as that suspended piece. From that, the humble beginnings grew that big blue thing over there, and with a lot of things in between. So is that satisfactory, sir?
This video was made possible by a grant from the Future Girl Foundation.
This video was made possible by thousands of private donations from members and viewers like you. Please visit thegeekgroup.org for more information on how you can donate and become a part of our dreams of Avalon.